I find it frustrating, and frankly, I find it insulting when all the speaker does is puts up the slide and then they start reading what's up there. I don't need you to read to me. But if you're going to make the slides clean and then you're going to engage me, you're going to stimulate me, you're going to tell me a story, you're going to put things into context, then I'm in. I'm in 100%. I want to hear what you have to say.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Stops. My name is Boris. I'm going to be your host yet again. However, you are, as I like to say, John, as I like to say to our audience and our listeners and our viewers on YouTube, they are not here for me. They are here for our guest. And today I have someone on the podcast who I have been admiring and looking at his work for a long time. His name is John Zimmer, and what do you need to know about him? Well, he is going to be one of the speakers at our conference Present to Succeed 2022 in April, which is not the most important thing, all right? But still, I need to say it. However, he is also the author of the blog Manner of Speaking that you can find, which is a incredible wealth of resources on the topic of presentation skills and overall public speaking. You can find it on mannerofspeaking.org. And lastly, he is also a keynote speaker. He trains a lot of organizations and institutions, like just to name a few, Deloitte, Roche, the World Health Organization. And again, this is just to name a few. John, hopefully that's more than enough for our listeners. So welcome to.
Thanks, Boris. It's great to be here.
So every single time with every single guest, we start with the same question, which is every single person in our industry has a very interesting story how they ended up in this industry. How did you end up in the presentation world?
Okay, the very short version. I'm from Canada and I'm trained as a lawyer. I worked in one of Canada's largest full-service law firms in Toronto for many years doing corporate commercial litigation and also environmental law. 1998, I had a fantastic opportunity to come to Geneva, Switzerland, where I currently am, to work on a very interesting program at the United Nations. It saw me travel throughout the Middle East. It was a compensation program that was very interesting. From there, I went to the International Organization for Migration. And when the program there wound down, I did 5.5 years at the World Health Organization. But along the way, as a lawyer, I was doing lots of speaking at conferences, in front of tribunals, in front of courts, and I enjoyed it. And I was helping other people with their presentations. And at some point I thought, well, maybe I could make a living at this full time. So 6 years ago, at the age of 53, 54, I left the World Health Organization to become a full-time professional speaker. As you said, I give keynotes, I moderate events, and I do lots of corporate trainings. I work with companies and organizations and individuals, helping them become better, more effective speakers. And I also teach at a few executive MBA programs in Switzerland and in Spain. So that is the condensed version.
Yeah. Brilliant. Side question here, because you're based in Switzerland, I have heard there are a lot of expensive cars in Switzerland.
There's a lot of expensive. There's a lot of expensive everything in Switzerland. So yes, it is true.
All right. And I know that there are some really brilliant roads where you can drive those cars.
It's amazing. And in fact, I've never been a big car person. I'm actually more into long distance cycling. And for that, Switzerland is magic. You've got flat, you've got hills, and then you've got the mountain roads. And it's spectacular.
Yeah, I haven't been there. Everyone is saying that we should go there. Obviously, we need to plan
Definitely.
at some point.
Definitely.
And hopefully sooner. Yeah. Let's go to the world of presentations now. Now that we know that you can find some extreme cars in Switzerland. All right. So you have been, as you said, you have been training so many organizations, global companies, like super big brands, and you work with them. Like I always like to say that these are the business people that are being asked to present whether they like it or not. This is actually also kind of the motto of our conference. Like we created this event for the business person who is being asked to present whether they like it or not. So we were discussing that it will be very interesting for us to talk about the mistakes that you see people in the business world do, so that once they hear it, because our audience are also business professionals, once they hear some of those, maybe someone will recognize themselves in one of those mistakes, and hopefully learn from what you are actually advising those people to fix, to improve on in that regard. What are the things that you see? Let's go one by one, probably from the biggest to the smallest. I don't know, but what are the things that you see people in the business world are not doing in the
Mm.
best way possible when
Sure,
we
sure,
talk
of
about
course.
presentations,
I mean,
obviously?
there's a lot to look at, and of course, everybody's different. Different organizations approach this differently. What is
Yeah.
very encouraging to me is that over the years, I have seen a greater awareness within companies and organizations of the importance of good presentation skills, the importance of good public speaking, because whether it's the CEO or a middle manager or somebody who is lower down in the company, when that person is out speaking in the public, they are the face of the company. When it comes to mistakes, I think a big one is that people tend to try and put too much into a presentation, too much information.
Mm.
And usually this comes from a good place. They want to share what they know with the audience, and they think, oh, if I just add more and more detail, it's going to be more helpful for the audience. But it almost always has the opposite effect. It becomes like a tidal wave of information on the audience. And this is where when I work with clients, I really encourage them before we start even thinking about things like slide or what data to put in, is to step back and to think big picture first. And what is involved in the big picture? Well, first of all, you think about who's the audience? What's your relationship with the audience? What are you going to be talking about? How does the subject relate to the audience? Why should they care about the subject? What do they know about it? Do they not? Do they like it? Do they not like it? These big picture questions. And then thinking about things like, what's the message? What the French have this great expression, they call it le fil rouge, the red thread. What is the one thing that runs through the entire presentation and holds it together? And when you think about that
Mm.
message, that key message that you want to get across, then you ask yourself, well, why should the audience care? Because this is another common issue that I see. Speakers have this message and it's clear in their minds and they think this is great, this is what I want to talk about, but they haven't stopped to ask themselves, why should the audience care about what I'm talking about? And they've got to come up
Yeah.
with at least one reason, because if you can't come up with at least one reason why the audience should care, then you're either speaking to the wrong audience or you're speaking about the wrong thing. So that for me is one of the
Yeah.
biggest problems, this dump of information without first stepping back and thinking about, what do I want to talk about and why is it important that these people hear it? And once people do have that nailed down, then building the presentation becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. So do you also advise them? Do you also advise them that once they know, hey, here is what the key message is that I want to communicate, and here is who my audience is, right? So understanding very much, like, in the best possible way and in the biggest, like, in vivid, I would say, not vivid, but in the best possible way, the audience itself. Do you also advise them to then later on during the brainstorm, like, just throw in their ideas and then take a look at again at, hey, here is the message that I want to convey, and here is who is in front of me. Now let's check more or less each and every idea I have and see whether or not it will help me communicate that message
Ex-
in front of
exactly.
that
That's a
group of
great way of
people.
describing it. It's once you know what you want to talk about and why it's important for the audience, then, as you say, get a sheet of paper and write down all the possible things that you could talk about. And don't censor yourself,
Mhm.
don't edit yourself, just put every idea, no matter how dumb it may seem, down on the paper. And then what you do, if you take that message and you use that as the lens through which you look at everything that you've written down, and from there you pick what is most essential for the audience. And you may have eight eight valid reasons why the audience should believe your message. But again, depending on how much time you have, talking about all eight is not necessarily the best way to go, because people can't remember all of these things. So a very simple fix to that would be to say something like, there are 8 good reasons why you should do X. Today, I just want to talk about 3. And if you just say that, you've signaled to the audience that there are all these other reasons, but today we're just going to focus on these 3. And if the audience leaves the room and they remember those 3 things, then you've done your job and you've done it well.
Yeah. By the way, one of the interesting things here is a lot of the people that are listening to us and were part of the first event, which was in April this year, because we're recording this, what is it
15th of
today?
October.
Like 15th of October 2021. Yeah. So I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on, because probably you have heard that question many, many times. A lot of people are asking, okay, John, okay, Boris, okay, whoever, you're telling me that it is absolutely essential to know who the audience is. Help me figure that out. How do I know who those people are? Like, what should I do to find that information? And then once I have it, what am I doing with that information in first place? Like, what are your
It's a
thoughts on
common
this
issue.
one?
And again, depending on the format, it might not be easy to get a lot of information. If you're speaking at an open conference and there are, let's say, 300 people attending, it's going to be hard to get a sense of exactly who everybody is. You're not going to be able to do it. However, there are a few things that can help guide you. First of all, the overall theme of the conference. What is the conference about? And that should give you some indication that people are interested in that. When I speak at a conference, I will speak with the conference organizers and I will ask them for a list of the attendees. At the very least, I can get a list of names and what their position is and the companies or organizations where they work. And that gives me some sense. When you're dealing with a smaller group of people, for example, somebody who is going to speak to individuals at a particular company or a particular organization, there are lots of good tools on the internet, such as SurveyMonkey, where you can create a very simple survey, should be less than 5 minutes to complete. You send it to the people, and then you can design questions that pull out key information that will help you create and hone and scope a presentation that really makes an impact. So there are different things that you can do, and I recognize it's not always easy.
Yeah, especially for the large audiences, it's way, way harder. But yesterday I got that question during a course that we were leading, and I was like, what is like exactly as you said, like what is the format? Like what type of presentation are we speaking here? Like, is it a boardroom type of thing? Is it like an online call in the webinar format? Like, is it a conference type of thing? And so it turned out that there is a conference, and I said, hey guys, like any conference is being organized by someone. All right, these are the so-called, as you mentioned, organizers, right? These guys have information about your audience, right? Shoot them an email, do a phone call with them, ask them who are the people that are coming. If possible, like you mentioned, get the list of the names and the roles and the companies. That will be, if that's possible, like that is super nice. That is super nice because it gives you a lot of context. But I just show them because we currently, when we're running the event, every single sponsor, for example, we have a slide with the demographics of the audience. And we're like, hey, here is like the fact that 60% of our audience is from Europe, right? 20% of those guys are IT people, 20 are from the HR field, 20 are from whatever. And you're like, okay, that is telling me something. I'm talking to a mixed audience, right? So once I have this information, what would you advise people to do with it?
When you've got the information about who the audience is, then if you know, for example, that a significant portion of the audience is working in HR, to take your example, then one very simple thing you can do is to just build into your presentation a reference to people working in the HR department. You can specifically call out that area of expertise and link what you're talking about to it, because that will be something that people will really appreciate, because it'll show that, hey, this speaker has actually thought about us. The speaker has tailored the speech to the audience. And this, I think, is a really fundamental point that's worth stressing. It's never about you or me when we are on stage speaking. It's always about the audience. And I always tell people that you will notice a massive leap forward in your speaking when you go into every presentation not thinking about yourself. How will I look? How will I sound? Are people going to like me? But rather you're thinking, how can I help the audience? How can I give this audience value for the time that they are giving me? Because let's face it, there are brilliant speakers out there who are giving great information and motivation and inspiration. But if we're being honest, I can get information, inspiration, motivation from Google. I can just find all kinds of things. But in return, what the audience is giving the speaker is something they can never get back, which is their time. And so you've got to make it worth their while. Thinking about, large audiences
Yeah.
where you don't know people, you don't know a lot in detail about people. One thing that I always do, and I recommend this to anybody speaking at a big event, is to go early. First of all, you want to get comfortable with the room. You want to get up on the stage if you can, walk the stage, meet the tech people, get prepared. But then once you've done all that, you can say hello. You can go up and chat with a few of the people who arrive early. You go introduce yourself. Who are you? I'm the speaker. Oh, cool. They're going to want to speak to you because they're there to listen to you. And what you can do is you can start building connections with your audience even before the presentation starts. But during those conversations, somebody might say something to you that is related to what you're talking about. And then when you're on the stage, you could say something like, well, in fact, Sarah and I, and you can look for Sarah in the audience and point her out, say, we were just talking about this very thing. And audiences love that. Even if you're not talking about me specifically, the fact that you've taken the time to get to know some of us, it shows that you're really there for the audience.
Yeah, I can cannot agree with you more, especially even though I think that your advice on going there earlier before the presentation starts is applicable not just to conferences but also to corporate meetings where you are being asked to present to a team that's not yours
Yes.
and people don't know you. I mean, this is still applicable. And the thing that you were saying, especially in the conference setup for the AV team, make for me, you shouldn't just go in there and meet them. I always try and make sure that they become my friends, before the session itself, because you never know, like you never know how much you need those guys, and you better have them on your side as much as you can if something happens. Like they need to feel like, okay, this person was so nice with me like 30 minutes ago. If something happens with him or with her, I will push myself to the limits to fix their problem, and it will be like something that I really want to do for them. You mentioned something very interesting, which leads me to another issue that at least we see in the corporate world. It will be interesting for me to hear your opinion. Is that you said, hey, sometimes there would be pieces of information that you can use as part of the talk that were born before the talk and as part of the discussions with some of the attendees. For me, that is I'm so in for that one. Do you think, however, that in order for whoever is listening to us to do that, I believe that in order for them to be able to do that, they need to be very well prepared, so that once they're on stage, they have the mental capacity somehow to remember that they talked to Sarah and include that as they go. Like, what are your thoughts on overall, like, the preparation that people put in the business world in regards to their presentations, also like rehearsals? Like, what are you seeing there?
Preparation for me is the foundation of any good speech or presentation. If you've read, well, I mean, so many people have talked about it, but I'm always reminded of what the Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu said in his book, The Art of War. He said, all battles are won before they are fought. And this is not to say that public speaking should be a battle. It definitely should not be. However, if you are prepared,
Yeah.
then you're going to be in a much better position to deliver on the day. And being well prepared means, it doesn't mean memorizing. And I tell people you should never memorize what you're going to say, because if you forget a word or a sentence, it will throw you off. but you should know it so well
Yeah.
that if you're going to cover 5 things, A, B, C, D, E, that you can go from A to B to C to D to E, no problem at all. The words will come out differently if you do it different times, but you will still cover these 5 points. And then once you have that, then you can improvise along the way. You can react to things in the moment. You can get off the main track and then easily get back on. So preparation, I think, is fundamental. In today's business world, the reality is that many times people don't have a lot of time to prepare. It's Tuesday afternoon, you're
Yeah.
told you've got to present this on Friday, and you've got 3 reports that have to be finished this week as well. And so oftentimes people don't have enough time to prepare, to think about the message, to structure the presentation in a way that there's a compelling opening, a logical development, and a good conclusion. They don't have time to rehearse it. And this is just the business reality. Having said that, I always tell people, look, you never know who's in the audience, as you said. You never know, there could be a major client or could be a major opportunity for you personally, professionally, for your company, your organization. It's worth carving out some time to really think about and to practice and to prepare so that you do a good job. Because, especially for people seeing you for the first time, you get one chance to make a good first impression. So you want to seize that.
Yeah. And still, do you see, like, even though people are so busy nowadays with so many things that they're doing nowadays with the COVID pandemic, etc., which is keeping people even in their houses, in their homes, where potentially there are even more things to distract them and to take out of their time. Like, do you see in the business world people understanding the importance of rehearsals, or and especially for important presentations, because I always kind of differentiate between a sync between the team members and something that I always say to our trainees: hey, you are like a professional in a specific area. You are mature enough, more or less, to say, hey, this presentation that's coming up next is a super important one. Like, that's not like a team sync or something. Do you see people like really understanding the importance of rehearsals? Do you see it improving? Like, where is the business world in your,
It's
like, what
mixed.
are you
It's
seeing there?
mixed. I'm working with some people
Hmm.
right now. Next week, I'm going to be working with a client, the head of a company based in Germany, who wants to practice for a 3.5 minute big pitch at a conference, and we're preparing to put in several hours on this 3.5 minute pitch, and that's very encouraging to me because it shows that the person realizes the importance of making every second in this 3.5 minutes count.
Count.
Other times there are people who say, I get contacted and the presentation is in 2 days and somebody else has done the slides. And of course, because the speaker hasn't had time, the slides are heavy with text. And it's a harder thing to deal with. But the trend is generally more towards recognizing that being able to present well is important. And in a somewhat interesting way, I think COVID has accelerated this awareness to an extent because people working at home, people communicating like you and I are doing right now through the internet, people have realized that, oh, I've got to be able to present and I've got to make it more interesting. And so there's somewhat of an awareness. But again, it's uneven. And I think it's always going to be uneven.
Yeah. Yeah. What about, you mentioned, like, what about the mistakes that you see with your customers? Because we were mentioning this word, COVID, and staying at home and presenting online through the web, etc. What are the things that you are seeing with your clients in regards to online presenting that they need to focus a little bit more on? Um, Maybe because they're considering virtual presentations the same as in person. We see that a lot, and
Mm.
I'm like, that's strange.
I
What
mean,
are
the
you seeing
the
there?
the challenges range from the logistical to more fundamental things. When it comes to logistics, one of the
Okay.
simplest things that people can do, and I'm still surprised after all this time more people are not doing it, is to raise the camera to eye level. like you and I have right now. And when you speak, don't talk to the screen. So right now I'm looking at you, which is by far my preference because I can see you and I see your reaction. And this is how we are as humans. But now you're seeing me and everybody's seeing me on the recording. I'm looking down, which breaks the connection. You've got to lift your eyes up and
Yep.
speak to the camera. When I first started off, I kept looking at people's faces. And so I just took a big Post-it note and put an arrow on it and stuck it next to the camera for the first couple of weeks. And it just kept pulling my eyes back up. And now I'm just used to speaking to the camera. So little things like that logistically
Yep.
can make a big impact. If we go more fundamentally, and this is something that I think, especially in companies where you have people calling their teams together to present something and everybody works with each other, I think not enough people are taking advantage of what I call what's an asynchronous presentation. In other words, why
Mm.
have all the team members assemble at a certain time to listen to me give a formal presentation? I could just as easily record the presentation, send it out to my team members and say, watch this presentation before our meeting next Friday. Then, Joe's going to watch it while
Hmm.
eating
All right.
breakfast and Jane's going to watch it while she's on the treadmill and people will watch it when it's convenient to them. But then what happens on at the Friday meeting? We all come to that meeting. Everybody has seen my presentation and we can immediately start working on it. We can start engaging. I can send them off into breakout rooms to do things because that's when online interactions become much more stimulating. It's when you get people involved, you get them doing things. And yes, they can answer polls and do things like that, but it's really when they're, I think, taking part and discussing and sharing their ideas and perspectives. So that's one way that I think a lot of businesses could make a better use of these online presentations.
Have you seen at least some of your clients apply that for some of the meetings that they would
A couple
otherwise
after
schedule?
speaking with them, a couple of them have done it. And they liked it. They said it was much more productive. I think it puts a little more
Yeah.
responsibility on the speaker because if I'm the speaker, I now have to set up my recording and make sure it's right and make sure am I happy with it, and then I have to send it out, and then I also have to go to the meeting. But it's like anything else. More effort going in, better product coming out.
Yeah. Have you heard, by the way, curious to hear that, like, have you heard some of your clients and the people that you are training saying, or I would use the word complain, even though it's not exactly a complaint, but someone saying, hey, what happened here? Like this online world, what happened with us? Like now we need to understand about lighting. Now we need to know a little bit about cameras, about microphones, about where should my camera be, all of that stuff. Like, are you hearing similar
Still,
comments
all of
from
that.
people?
I'm hearing all of that, and
All right.
and I'm on top of layered over everything. I'm hearing about Zoom fatigue. To use Zoom as as
Yeah.
yeah, the
Zoom, yeah.
vehicle or the platform. But yes, people are just generally tired of it. I think there's a real hunger to get back for at least among a number of people to get back with face-to-face interactions. And it'll be interesting because I think when we are finally through with COVID, and let's hope it's soon, I don't think it's going to be the way it was during the worst parts of COVID, but I don't think the business world is going back to the way it was before either. I think we're going to come out with something that is new. There is going to be more online interaction, which I think is a good thing because for meetings, for example, where instead of having to fly people from all corners of the earth to some city for 3 days, they can stay home and they don't have to travel. And that's better for the environment and it's less stressful for them. So I think there's going to be this combination of back face to face and online. Recently, I've been traveling in Italy and Germany and Finland for work, and it's been just such a pleasure for me to actually be in the same room with people because
Go back.
it
Yeah.
just feels great. But at the same time, I'm not, I've learned to like these kinds of interactions because now you and I get a chance to speak. You're in Bulgaria, I'm in Switzerland. We have this chance to interact. And I think it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. We didn't mention any of the things that people need to look at when we talk about the subject of slides. Many organizations, many people need slides when they're about to present in the business context. Anything that you see that you are giving advices to your clients when we talk about, like, specifically
Right.
around the visuals? Let's not focus all, like, let's not say that it's always a PowerPoint or some, like, always a Apple keynote. All around the visuals, like, what's happening there, what do you see that people can do a better job there, and obviously that will result in better and overall more effective
When it comes
presentations.
to slides, I always tell people, think of yourself as a sculptor. And by that I mean, when Michael, you look at a statue like the David by Michelangelo, and what did Michelangelo add to the marble to make it into the David? Well, he brought his creativity, he brought his imagination, but physically, it's what he took away that made it the work of art that it is. And I tell people, when you're looking at your slides, anytime you can take something out and it doesn't negatively impact the audience's ability to understand, do it. If you can say it in 5 words instead of 8, if you can say it in 3 words instead of 5, if you don't need all of these points, anything you can take out, do it. Because still today, too many people put too much information on the slides. And when that happens, you are forcing your audience to make a choice. Either I'm going to forget the slide and just listen to you, or what happens more often, I'm going to start forgetting about you and I'm going to start reading. And then the problem is somebody's reading the logo and somebody's looking at the graph and somebody is a fast reader and at the bottom, and we're all over the place. And so what I tell people is that a slide does not serve the same purpose as a document that you hold in your hand and read with a cup of coffee. It has a different purpose. And so a good rule of thumb, and this doesn't have to be for all slides. You can have complex slides if the purpose is to show the complexity or to just give a quick overview. But
Yeah.
in general, I tell people a slide should contain about the same amount of information as a sign at the side of the highway, the auto route. You're driving along at 130 kilometers an
Yeah.
hour and you look, the sign is coming up, and you've got about 3-4 seconds to look at that slide, pull the information about distance to your destination or where the next exit is, and then get your eyes back on the road, because otherwise you're going to get in an accident. And it should be the same for a slide. If
Yep.
a new slide comes up, I should be able to look at it, get a sense of it, and then get quickly back to the speaker. So just that one
Yep.
change will make a huge impact. And I tell people, if you want to have a handout, create a separate document and put in all the details and the footnotes and the data and all the points you want. And then you can hand that out. But the slides serve a different purpose. And there's still this lack of understanding, I think, generally in the business world. People try and put everything on the slide. Sometimes it's because they haven't had enough time to prepare, if we go back to what we talked about, and then they're
Yep.
using the slides as their speaking notes, which is a huge mistake. Your slides are not your speaking notes. They are there to help the audience understand the point you're trying to make.
Yeah. I see a lot of resistance in the business world when we talk about, hey, slides are super simple, super visual, like the small brothers of billboards, as you mentioned, yet like some type of a presentation that's like a document style. Like in our industry, a lot of people, depending on whose books you read, more or less, you will see, okay, is it a slide document, is it a slide doc, again, depending on the book that you read. But many people resist, like, when you mention it, they very quickly mention that they don't have time for that, and they prefer to have one document which is the more detailed one, because they know that most of the times they are going to be asked to send it over
I
afterwards?
I hear this all the time, and I've had this discussion with clients, and people tell
Yeah,
me exactly like you said. They said, "Yeah, but I put everything in the slide because we hand it out afterwards, and then they have it." And so I say to them, "So
yeah,
everything I need to know is in the slide?" And they say, "Yeah, it's all there." And I say, "That's fantastic. Why do I need you?" And I'm not a bad
yeah,
guy, but honestly, if you're telling me that everything I need to know is in the slide, you can save everyone a lot of time. Just turn the slide into a PDF, email it to me. I promise I'll read it because I can read faster than you can speak. And then if I have any questions, I will
yeah,
get back to you. And I find it frustrating.
yeah,
And frankly, I find it insulting when all the speaker does is puts up the slide and then they start reading what's up there. I don't need you to read to me. But if you're going to make the slides clean and then you're going to engage me, you're going to stimulate me, you're going to tell me a story, you're going to put things into context, then I'm in. I'm in 100%. I want to hear what you have to say. But
yeah. That's a
yeah,
completely different level.
it's,
Yeah,
I mean, even if, and I think people should have simple slides, but if you're going to have lots of information, I mean, doing things like animating bullet points so they come in one at a time when you're ready for them. That way, at least you keep the audience with you. Or if you have a chart full of numbers, you can highlight a number or have a circle appear around the key number to draw my attention to the number. A slide presentation, it's not an Easter egg hunt. I shouldn't have to be looking all over the slide. Where's the key information? You should bring me to it.
yeah. Yeah, and especially with data, and especially in front of some audiences like executives and managers and leaders, uh, they them you leaving them hunting around the slide for what that what is the message here, most of the times lead to something that you probably notice also with your clients complaining about it. At least I have heard this so many times. Like they constantly ask us around, I was about to present that message to them, and then they saw this table of data or chart, and they stopped me by asking, like, "Wait, why is that number 5?" And yet at the same time, the focus and the message on this slide has nothing to deal with that number and that value. That's in this case, let's say 5. However, you're pushing them to look and to analyze the data
If if
themselves.
if you put
And
it up on the screen, it's fair game. Anybody can make a comment or a question about it.
yeah, that is true. One last here before we wrap this up, because I know that you have a very, how can I say it? You really care about the start and the end of each presentation. I won't go to the
We've done
start
that.
because I think that the ending of the presentation is also incredibly interesting. At least in my view, I continue to see, as in the business world, at conferences, like many formats, I continue to see endings that sound like the speaker talks, then they go silent, and then they say, "Well, I think that's it. Thank you, and
That
have
really
a
is
great day."
it. Yeah.
So, how do you see this with your clients,
Yes,
and
and
what do you
again,
advise them
it's
to do?
interesting because it links back to this whole idea of preparation. When people are preparing, when they do a little bit
Mm,
of rehearsal, the openings tend to get worked on more because they start going through it and they reach a point and they either make a mistake and they say, okay, no, let's try it this way. So let's start again. So they're starting again, starting again.
mm,
So the beginning gets worked really well and the ending less so. But as you say, your conclusion, your ending is crucial because it's the last thing the audience is going to hear. And psychologists, when it comes to principles of remembering, they talk about the principles of primacy and recency. People tend to remember the first things they hear and the last thing. And too many people throw away their ending, just as you said. But I think that's it. Any questions? Great, thank you, goodbye. And so what I tell people for your endings, you want to really protect them. So a couple of things. First of all, slow down. Too many people accelerate because they see the end is coming up and they can think, I can just get off the stage and be done with this. You want to go the opposite direction. Slow down. Take your time. Summarize the key things you want the audience to remember. There should be no new information in a conclusion. It should be all a repetition of the key things that you've said. If you have a call to action, if there's something you want them to do, this is the time to bring it in. A simple technique, you don't have to do this, but every time I've seen it done, it adds polish to a presentation, is to come back to the beginning. You circle back. A lot of people think of a presentation as linear. You have a beginning, an opening, the development, and then the conclusion. And I think of it as circular. You have the opening, the development, and the conclusion. You come back to the beginning. And so if you began with a story, then maybe you come back and give, towards the end, you give the conclusion of that story. Or you started with a question, you answer it. Or a quote, you come back to the quote or a different quote. Something like that looks really nice. Two other ideas for people to consider, both of which are counterintuitive for most people. The first one is never, ever, ever have a slide that says, thank you. It's a terrible, terrible use of your final slide because, first of all, sometimes you don't want to thank your audience. If you're giving an inspiring speech to your team or your company, you can leave them with something better than thank you. We're a great team. Let's get out there and do it. But the second reason is that if you want to thank your audience, do you really need a slide? Why not just look at them and thank them? Say thank you. Thank them sincerely. Thank them from your heart and say, thank you very much, whatever you want to say, if you're going to thank them. Your final slide should be, a summary of your key points or some amazing image linked to your presentation or even your contact details. Any of those is better. And then the other idea, again, which is counterintuitive, I tell people where you can control the speaking situation, which is not always the case if you're at a conference or whatever, but where you can control your speaking time, don't end with questions and answers. And the reason is because you never know what the questions are going to be. That's the wild card. And I love questions and answers because it's a real chance to engage with the audience. But somebody at the back, if they ask a question which is either off topic or irrelevant, what is everybody else doing? They're picking up these things and they're starting to, okay, well, let me check my email. Oh, is he still speaking? And that's how your presentation ends. It's like a balloon slowly deflating. So what I tell people is where you can control the situation, just make a minor shift. So for example, if you have 40 minutes to speak and you think I'm going to speak for half an hour and then take 10 minutes of questions, instead of going 30 minutes and 10, speak for 25 minutes. If you can cover it in 30, you can cover it in 25. And when you get to minute 25, then you say, now, before I conclude, I'd like to open the floor for questions. And so you've signaled to your audience that you still have something to say. But now we're going to do questions. So you take the questions for 10 minutes. And that brings you to minute 35. And at minute 35, even if there are more questions, you can say, I see there are still some more questions. I'm more than happy to speak with you over coffee after, but I only have a few minutes and I'd like to conclude. And in my experience, people respect that. And then what happens? Control returns to you as the speaker. And now you are going to decide what is going to be the last thing that people hear. So these are all some tips. They're all, there's no magic to them. They're all basically common sense, but these are some things that can really make for a strong conclusion.
Yeah, I have also advised our clients whenever they have the control over the setup and the format to always keep the end for themselves. This is the perfect moment for you to hit with your call to action and potentially even with the reason why people should act, right? And by the way, a lot of people are trying this and really feel the difference, because the questions and answers part just becomes part of the talk itself. And somehow it adds even more value to the talk. And then at the end, it's just like a so much more complete package somehow. And so the ovation, especially when it's a conference talk, it's even.
And if the questions don't come, because some audiences, depending on the culture or the situation, nobody asks a question. If you've already concluded, then it just ends like that. This way, you've got something else to say.
Yeah. John, we can speak about that topic and about presentations for many, many hours. However, we need to wrap this up. All right. So, let's wrap this up with two very quick questions. The first one is, who else do you think we should get on the podcast? This is just one name, all right? One name that is either in the presentation world or is someone that you saw, that you worked with, that for some reason impressed you with, again, something related to their presentation skills. Do you have a name?
There's put me on the spot. I'm
head?
trying to think. I mean, in the presentation world, of course, you know, there are the Gar Reynolds, the Nancy Duartes, who would be great to have, just, you know, because they're so experienced in their particular fields, especially when it comes to slide design. I'll think about it. I'll let you know.
Anyone else? All right. Gar and Nancy are still haven't been on the podcast, so I can start with Gar. We were in discussions and we were chatting with Gar at some point, and then something happened. So maybe this will be the podcast.
Maybe. Come on, Gar, you can do it. Gar.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last here, a two-part question here. Where can people find more about what you're doing, and what is the best place or social network?
So as you mentioned at the outset, my website is called Manner of Speaking, all one word, mannerofspeaking.org. It started out 13 years ago just as a simple blog on WordPress, and it's now my full business site. People can get in contact with me there, see the things I do. And I think most importantly, there are between 900 and 1,000 blog articles, all free, all on public speaking, that people can have a look at. And I hope you find something helpful there. Besides that, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, a little bit on Instagram, and it's all linked on the blog. You can find everything there.
Yeah, I think that people should definitely go to your blog, because there is a wealth, I would say, of information there on the topic. So everyone, again, mannerofspeaking.org. Of course, we are going to link John's LinkedIn plus his website in the show notes or in the YouTube description or whatever it's called, so you can find it there. John, thanks for joining.
Boris, it's been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Looking forward to seeing you in April again, even though until then we're going to be in touch. Everyone, again, all of the things that John mentioned will be in the show notes or in the description, depending on how you're consuming this podcast. And also our website, 356labs.com, not 365labs. Again, I need to mention that. So every single time I try to mention that, it's 356labs.com. And of course, the conference Present to Succeed. John will be there. A lot of people will be there as speakers and as an attendee. So if you still don't know about Present to Succeed, go check it out, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks for listening, everyone. Subscribe to the podcast, like it, like the video, like the audio, follow the podcast. You know what you need to do. And yeah, see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.